Hammer, his twice-weekly showcase of the music that Hamilton loves. His latest project is gunnersmith.ca, a web platform devoted to all things Hamilton. Next, we have Mark Milne from Sonic Onion Records. And Mark is the co-founder and co-owner of Sonic Onion, which was established back in 1992. And actually, some of us were having a discussion yesterday trying to remember what year it was, so we could have looked it up. Initially, it was an independent record company, and Sonic Onion has grown over the years to add sub-labels and music-related companies, including Goodfellow Records, Sonic Onion Metal, Labwork Music, and Sonic Onion Distribution, right? Some of which have been sold to major labels. More recently, Sonic Onion is known as the primary production team behind Hamilton's Supercrawl Festival and this year's inaugural Hamilton Blues and Roots Festival. Mark's been fortunate over the years to be the recipient of awards including Independent Label of the Year, Hamilton Chamber of Commerce's Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Juno Awards, and Hamilton Tourism Awards for Supercrawl. And he's also involved in several downtown Hamilton property projects focused on bringing new life to old buildings, primarily for use by those in the arts. And he lives in downtown Hamilton with his wife and daughter. And the art crawl, which is taking place after today, is a sort of adjunct to Supercrawl, and we'll certainly be discussing some of that. Next, we have Casey Masija, and she's an accomplished musician and community organizer. And there's two experiences that guide her artistic practice. She's been the lead singer-songwriter of a band called Obiju, and her experience as an arts educator for young Filipino women. Music has allowed Casey to visit China, Japan, much of Europe, and large and small cities across Canada. So from these travels, she's culled a new grammar of experience that she hopes to craft into music. While at home in Toronto, her recent position as coordinator of an arts program for young Filipino women called Clutch, in tandem with her studies in art education, have helped her to learn that her role as an artist is inextricable from her experiences as a woman of color. Casey's mission is to create art that aims to signify an experience that is multidimensional and can capture the multiple axes of her personality. She's also the co-founder of the Friends in Bellwoods music project, which has raised now $40,000 and counting for the Daily Bread Food Bank in Toronto. Next, we have Sam Siva. And Samantha has developed a name for herself as Arsis Sam, who is the woman behind organizing a successful monthly hip-hop showcase at Homegrown dubbed Steel Gold. She's been nominated for Hamilton Music Awards People's Choice for Event of the Year in 2012. She's actually born in New Zealand and has lived in 5 countries. A world traveler who has set up shop in Hamilton 4 years ago and has been helping cultivate and reignite the hip-hop community in Hamilton. And she's the director of the Roots to Leaf project, an initiative that inspires and empowers youth through the elements of hip-hop. She also coordinates events, concerts, conferences, and art exhibits. And finally, beside me, we have Amber Osman. And Amber's an artist, musician, and teacher who lives, works, and plays in Hamilton. She completed her undergraduate degree at McMaster, majoring in studio arts and peace studies, and recently finished an MA in urban studies with a concentration in community arts through Eastern University in Philadelphia. Currently, she spends half her week as the program coordinator at the Urban Arts Initiative on James Street North, where art programming is offered to at-risk, homeless, and street-involved youth. With the rest of her time, she teaches music lessons from home and works on her own painting practice. And in her artwork, she's currently exploring the possibilities of fluid acrylic media for sculptural forms. So those are our 6 panelists. I think what we'll do is have them introduce them, even though I've introduced them briefly with the bio, introduce themselves and their engagement with the Hamilton music scene and maybe some of their opening thoughts. So maybe I'll start directly on my right with Amber and then move back down.
Thank you, Sam. So my name is Amber, and as you heard, I work at the Urban Arts Initiative, which is right on James Street North, and we're going to be going there after following this panel. It'll be one of the stops on our mini crawl, so you'll get to see my place of work. And we're doing some, I think, very exciting work there with the youth in this city. And we're not limited to music. We're doing all forms of the arts, but we certainly we do engage with music as well. And we're really convinced that by using the arts, we can engage youth with their communities, we can engage them with education, and that we can improve their mental health. So that's kind of the hat that I'll wear for this panel discussion, and that's where I'll speak from.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I am a hip hop promoter, and I also run a project called Roots to Leaf, which mentors and empowers you through the arts and elements of hip hop. I moved to Hamilton about 4 years ago. Kind of seemed in the beginning stages of the revitalization period that we're going through right now. When I came, there really wasn't a home base for hip hop in the community of Hamilton, though there was a thriving community that existed here. So I established Still Gold, a monthly hip hop show where we can enjoy the arts of hip hop and come together as a community and network and build together. Since that time, about 2 years ago, the hip hop community has blown up. There's shows like almost every week now, where there used to be shows only once every few months, and it's kind of happened at the same time as the whole arts community has grown on James North. And so I'd kind of be speaking from that perspective of being somebody in the community that's working with the musicians and the artists and what we've done as a community to unite together and lift each other up and grow together as a community in the music scene here.
My name is Casey. I'm a professional musician and have been playing music professionally for about 10 years. I'm here because I've toured and have played in Hamilton a number of times during my time as a musician. I was, in fact, telling Mark that as a teenager I was very invested in Sonic Onion and the Hamilton downtown scene. Growing up in Brantford, Hamilton was my Toronto and was where I came to see music. So it's interesting that we're having these conversations now about this developing urban arts revitalization because my experiences as a youth and where it is now gives me some perspective on that matter. I'm also a community-based arts organizer. I work in community development, and I'm interested in how gentrification and this idea of revitalization takes care of people who live and exist within communities and how development can be responsible towards those people.
Hi, my name is Mark, and I wanted to be a professional musician, and I failed. I think there's a threshold for professional. Hamilton was also my Toronto. I grew up in Burlington, and it was also the Toronto for my two business partners who grew up in Stony Creek and in Dundas. And we started promoting shows, playing in a band, and we started a record label. And there was a very vibrant music scene in the early 90s in Hamilton, and we worked really hard to promote it outside of Hamilton, and across North America, internationally the best we could. And we did a whole bunch of stuff after that took 20 years, so I could go on at length, but I still do essentially the same thing, but a whole bunch of other things on top of that. We're really dedicated to downtown. We've been located in downtown Hamilton since 1995. We were under a lot of pressure over the years to move to Toronto. We never did. We never wanted to. And we're glad that now that we've stuck around long enough, the rest of the art community kind of showed up. So we're coincidentally in the right place at the right time, I suppose, 20 years later even. So.
Was it Woodstock or no? 1968, the big festival with The Who and Jimi Hendrix? Well, 69. Okay. If you ever watch the documentary, I would be The Who following Jimi Hendrix. Don't do that. Anything I'm going to say now is irrelevant. I mean, this guy is amazing. You can laugh. It's okay. I know it's a panel discussion. My name's Jamie Smith, Jamie Gunner Smith. Locally here in town, I'm known as the big cheerleader. I rebranded Indie 101, a college station, and I've been a teacher, a mentor of radio students up at Mohawk College up until last year. I've been a volunteer at 93.3 CFMU for over 20 years, and I started out in music here in Hamilton when I was 19, and just around the same time he started his label, I started mine, but it went different directions. But it seems to be working out okay now, though. Okay, good. I started a website called gunnersmith.ca, and it's basically dedicated to young musicians, old musicians, people from Hamilton to promote what they love. And because a lot of it is, right now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, there's this thing called Facebook, and we rely so much on it to tell people what's going on, and all people do is click like and they still don't show up to your shows. So with my website, I'm trying to get people to think outside the box and promote themselves. So that's what I'm up to, and that's where I'll be speaking from, being a Hamiltonian.
I'm Graham, and I've lived in Vancouver for 17 years and Toronto for 10 years before that. I'm born and raised in Hamilton, the East Mountain, and returned here in 2000. Very excited after being in those bigger scenes, at the potential I could see here. And because there was something happening, and I've had the great pleasure over the last 11 years, last dozen years, I guess, of watching it grow in leaps and bounds. And I can also, and I guess I go back a little bit further in this town than most, because I can remember in 1970 when I was going to high school, and the Crowbar House over on Mohawk Road. I can remember riding by it on my bicycle, wondering what wonderful things were going on in that house. Of course, that's where the first CanCon hit song came from, "Oh, What a Feeling." This is such a remarkable town. It has great heritage. Don't forget that. Yes, we are undergoing a renaissance, but this is the place where Ronnie Hawkins first parked his Cadillac, playing that show at the Golden Rail in 1958. This is the place where the band signed their first contract in a now derelict hotel just down the street on King Street East, the old Royal Connaught. It's where the Hawks signed with Harold Cudlitz, and eventually went on with Bob Dylan. And this is the place where Ronnie Hawkins picked all his band members, the band, Crowbar, where Teenage Head became the best punk band in Canada, where the ambient music scene was started with Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno. They created it here, used the city as a laboratory for sounds that would later translate into Peter Gabriel and U2. This city is not just the last 5-10 years. It has a heritage that lasts, and that's one of the great things. I think all performers, all artists coming out of there either are well aware of that heritage or are learning it, and the more they find that out, the better.
That's one of the questions I kind of scribbled down here. I'm wondering about the relationship between Hamilton's past and its history and what is going on now. I mean, is something different now? Is this a continuation? Is it a revitalization? I mean, what is that relationship that you're finding and what's going on? Is it an ongoing history of Hamilton Rock, or is it something new that's starting up?
I can pick up where I left off on that. One of the great things about the scene here, and it is a scene, and it's very interconnected, and it's been happening for a long time, is the role the older artists have in developing the newer artists. I remember as a kid finding out about the great Jackie Washington, a guy who knew by heart 1,300 songs from the Great American Songbook that he could just pull out. He was instrumental in teaching in the late 60s and early 70s during the coffee house culture and the great songwriting revival of Ontario at the time. He was instrumental in teaching so many great musicians the ropes. Tom Wilson learned from him. Stan Rogers learned from him in this town. People like Paul Angel, on and on and on. And that kind of, to use the old cliche, passing the torch, has continued. I watch guys like Dave Rave from and Gord Lewis from Teenage Head working with young bands, with teenage rock bands, and they're working and they're developing them. Chris Houston from the Forgotten Rebels is in there right now. He produced the last Illusion Avenue album. So that is a very, very important aspect of the scene here, is that there are no age cliques. There are no, I don't even think there's genre cliques. It's a real melting pot for ideas and a place to share experience and talent.
I don't like the term scene at all. I think, but it just seems to be just a scene is something temporary. This is a scene here. This is a scene here. I look at it as a community in Hamilton when it comes to music, and even with art, I think what is so great about the Hamilton music community is the fact that what Graham said, the older generation helps the younger generation. But I also find that people are finding out more about Hamilton because of some of the newer artists that just broke out. The Arkells, essentially some of them are from Toronto, but they lived here in Hamilton on Arkell Street. There's a band called the Dirty Nil. There's a band called San Sebastian. A lot of these bands are garnering a lot of attention. Tommy Swick as well. So you have the old guard, which is great, but some of the newer guard, and even electronic artists as well, Junior Boys and Caribou. There's a lot of them that are bringing a lot of world attention back here to Hamilton. And I think, just from my opinion, is that the thing about Hamilton is why I champion it so much, is that I grew up and lived here. And the thing about it is that we've always had this slight inferiority complex to Toronto. I don't know how it started. I think we didn't beat them in the Grey Cup enough or something. I don't know what it is. But it was, when I was younger, I was always told, you got to get out of Hamilton. You have to go to Toronto. That's where you're going to get discovered. You go play the Horseshoe, you go do the Rivoli, you go do those places, the X Club, and then someone will see you. But that's no longer the case here, because we've had so many great artists expound how great Hamilton is. They're from here. People are starting to catch on. But since the internet, God bless Al Gore, you don't really have to leave Hamilton without, you can sell yourself. But I still think we have that slight inferiority complex, and we're almost getting over it.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I've had a little bit of a different experience promoting hip hop in Hamilton, where I initially had the same thoughts as Gunnar, that a lot of the Hamilton artists and musicians wanted to, if they wanted to prosper, had to leave Hamilton. But in promoting, I bring a lot of musicians from all over Canada to Hamilton. And one of the things that I've heard, and speaking with Harrison Kennedy this morning, he was saying, he travels all over the world, and everybody from Vancouver Island to, Memphis, Tennessee, to, Europe, wherever he goes, people mention Hamilton. People are aware of what is happening here. And in speaking with Toronto artists, a lot of them are hungry to come here. I think there's been a shift somewhat with the awareness of the camaraderie and the power in the community that we have here, that has kind of, Toronto artists it's a very like crabs in the bucket sort of mentality, where in Hamilton, the community kind of like supports each other however they can, and we're growing together in that fashion, and that is not something, living in so many different places, that's not something that happens everywhere. And it's one of the things that attracted me to Hamilton, to make Hamilton my home.
It's cheap to live here too.
It is cheap.
And that's why people move here.
A starving musician can eat a lot better here. So, I think there's with the technological revolution too, and everybody being able to promote themselves independently, and Hamilton taking the stance of community and for the arts rather than competitive prosperity. It's been a shift, and I think the rest of the world is kind of paying attention to that and wanting to take part in that now.
I think I'm interested in understanding what this idea of community is, and what makes up this community that the panel is speaking of, and who gets to participate in this community, and what that looks like here. From being in Toronto, being from Toronto, I would love to know what you mean by the community, just to get a better idea of what you're saying. And also, I just wanted to point out, as we talk about our heritage, that as we talk about revitalization and urban spaces, that we are on colonized land, that this is land that we are, that this is land that belonged to other people. And I just wanted to make sure we had space to think about that.
I think in terms of a community versus a scene, I've always kind of thought that as soon as the cities as they get named, there's there's a great scene in this town or whatever. Once they're being called a scene, it's kind of like it's almost over. It's like everyone's fighting one another. Everyone's moving there to be part of something that, you know, maybe exists, but now that it's being infiltrated by people who just want to be part of it because it's happening, it's dead. It's over. Whereas, and that's what Hamilton started to turn like in the early 90s a little bit, the same way Halifax or Seattle did, I think, a little bit. And I wouldn't say it was very community oriented. It was to start with, and it just kind of got like little, you know, nitpicky and, you know, people not being very community oriented. Whereas now, I think, the word community sort of sounds to me like it embraces more people, and like, a scene seems to kind of just say, well, the people that are in the right clique are in that scene and they support each other because they kind of feel like they should. Whereas now it's wide open community, and it's not just musicians, it's artists, it's all every kind of, artist involved. And it's not just artists, it's people like, turning buildings around and like turning the whole urban landscape around to make it a better place to live for everybody. And that's sort of a better feeling and a better mood to have going on than what I think people generally refer to as a scene. I hope there's no scene happening here.
Who is the audience for the Hamilton? I mean, who is being attracted to this? Because there's a lot of attention. I mean, there's even coverage in Toronto newspapers of this burgeoning Hamilton scene, and there's so much going on. But who is coming? Who is coming out to gigs? Who is getting involved? I mean, is it a certain age bracket? Is it a certain income bracket? Is it a certain education? I mean, or is it really a community-wide initiative? Is it really a small group of Hamiltonians who are kind of hoisting this banner somehow?
I think when you say Hamiltonians, people that are coming out to shows, Burlington, Dundas, Milton, all that greater area that surround us, they come out to the shows. And when you say, who's coming in to see the shows, a lot of people from Toronto are coming in to see shows because we're starting to jump up and down and be cheerleaders about ourselves again. And that's in part to Mark and Tim at Supercrawl, which started 5 years ago. And the programming was something different. I mean, here in Hamilton, we've always had the Festival of Friends, It's Your Festival, and we would bring in Kim Mitchell or Saga or something, or even, I don't know, the dude from Motley Crue. He came in once, and it's kind of like, oh, hey, great, pit bulls and beer, awesome. Nothing against pit bulls and beer, but with Supercrawl, it started booking arts and crafts style bands, the dreaded hipster verbiage, But there was different types of music that was being programmed. So I think that was kind of like a big flag saying, hey, there's something, you can enjoy something different here in Hamilton, and it can be a free concert. So I think, and even with the hip hop as well, the programming as well, I interviewed her 2 years ago, and I asked her the question, I go, who goes out to hip hop shows? Who in Hamilton? Is this like, what is this scene that you're helping out with? And she said it's really big. I'm like, I had no knowledge of it because I booked hip hop before with other people, and it just didn't fly because we weren't connected to the community as she is. So I think the scene thing is right. Get rid of that. It's a community, but who's coming to it? All ages are coming to it. People of every age that enjoy music, and I also think that because of technology, people are listening to different styles of music, and they have a better grasp of what they enjoy. And even the programming in some of the radio stations has changed to be diverse. So it's reflecting that. So I think everyone is listening to something different and consuming it differently, and that's who comes to Hamilton. It's not just segmented as it was in the late 80s and very early 90s, where it's like you go to Dallas Rocks, which was that really big club that you have everywhere you go, where they have mullets and acid wash jeans. That's what that was, So it's not segmented like that. People like blues. They like electronic music. They like DJs as well.
I noticed a change here. We were very challenged in getting people from the suburbs out here for a long time. The core of Hamilton has had a bad rap for a long time. People sit out there in Ancaster and Waterdown, Stony Creek, and Burlington, they have nightmares about stepping into Hamilton at night and getting knifed and whatever, and whether this was remotely true or not. And we've had a challenge in bringing the people. Let's face it, the money in this area is in the suburbs, and that is changing. I've noticed that over the last 5 years, and it's important to get those. Whether they're empty nesters, the people who have the two-car garages out in Ancaster, where I live, incidentally, with a two-car garage, it's important to get those people in because, funny, my neighbors are asking me, how are the guys from Teenage Head doing? I hear there's a Wednesday night show down at the St. Hollywood that Gordy Lewis is hosting. What's it like? Is it safe? And sure enough, honest to God. And sure enough, these people are starting to come down. And I think what you said, Jamie, about Supercrawl, really, that in combination with the Friday night art crawls, has started to bring those people out of the suburbs and rediscovering a very active, energetic community down in the core of the city, and it's fantastic that is happening. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to bump into people on James North, in places like the Pearl Company, from the suburbs, and it's kind of exciting. And they're coming back, and without knives in their backs.
Given that there's a lot of people here who aren't from Hamilton, I'm wondering if maybe we should spend a little bit of time talking about some of this history of, what is Supercrawl, what is Art Crawl, what's going on James Street North, and what has been going on, and how that contributes to this formation of, I won't call it a scene, really an industry, and a kind of vibrant growing industry. How significant has that been to maybe fill in some of the blanks for people, and a lot of them who will be walking along there tonight?
The one thing I want to make explicitly clear is that there'd be no Supercrawl if it weren't for Art Crawl. And Art Crawl doesn't belong to anybody. There's no organizer. It's its own organic thing. And Tim and I, who are on Sonic Onion, together with Dane Peterson, run Supercrawl. And we are very, very cognizant of the fact that we don't want to step on anyone's toes. And, we feel we tread very carefully and need to make sure that Supercrawl doesn't take away from what's been happening organically on its own without anyone's guiding hand, and that's a really important
How many
topic.
people did you get out at Supercrawl last year?
80,000.
80,000.
How much money was generated, tourism dollars? Come on, just say it.
I know that the city of Hamilton, for their contribution, had a 114,000 return on investment, 114,000% return on investment. And we had to reduce that to show that to them because it was too mind-boggling. That's when you plug in all the numbers into the standard Ontario sort of forms that figure out what the economic impact is.
And how much did it cost the public to attend?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Susan wants to jump in.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here just for a second. Because we have an audience of people who are largely from outside of Hamilton, I wonder if some of you could kind of back up and sort of explain, what is Art Crawl, what is Supercrawl, what's happening
I'm not explaining it.
on James Street North. Amber, fill us in.
So Art Crawl is every second Friday of the month. All of our galleries, all of our shops, everything that's along James Street North is open doors. So the galleries are no cost admission. We drive, I don't know numbers wise, it depends. Winter is kind of a rough season sometimes, but we get literally thousands of, say that again?
In the summer, it's almost dangerous that the screen's open. It seems like,
Several thousand.
Yeah, more.
Yeah, so literally thousands of people from all over the city, outside the city, are coming to check out what's happening. In our gallery, for example, we're showcasing the work of homeless youth. So they're presenting the work alongside of every other recognized artist, emerging artist, established artist in the whole city. So it's this very interesting, really multidisciplinary, multi-generational kind of scene that you get every single month. And then Supercrawl, maybe Mark, you want to speak to Supercrawl a little more, but...
Basically 5 years ago, Tim and Dane had a conversation about doing something bigger on the September, actually, I guess it was October the first year, which I thought was kind of crazy. It was cold. It was raining. And, yeah. raining sideways. But basically, it's sort of an amped up version of it. I mean, we're in the music business, so we thought, if we can bring more people down to the area by, programming some really great stages, that's more people in the galleries, more people in the shops, more people on the street. Can't be a bad thing. So I'm not gonna lie. The first year when Tim and Dane said they were doing this, I was like, how much is it gonna cost? How are we paying for this? And Tim's like, don't worry, it's gonna be fine. It never has been. But it was well worth it. I mean, and they proved me wrong. And since then, it's just grown over the years. And it's essentially, I guess if you could take all the art shops and the galleries and all the dancers and all, the people from Gritlit and all the kinds of different sort of like areas of art, and if you could, for one day, essentially give them a platform. That's kind of what we're trying to do. It's really difficult to do. It's really difficult to get everyone represented. It's really difficult to keep everything organized, and the red tape is beyond belief. But it's well worth it. I mean, it's worked really well, and it's helped a lot. I think it's helped the area, and I know for a fact because we do surveys every year, and we use an outside company to do it to verify the results. But the people that come, it's every generation. It's children, it's seniors, it's, we were kind of thinking it'd be this big hump in the middle and 17 to 35 age group, and it was just kind of flat. And which is great. It's great to see people of all ages, all everything showing up to these events and enjoying not just music, but if you go for music, you might go down and, hear someone from Gritlit, doing some spoken word and think, wow, this is something I've never been exposed to. And I think it's kind of mind-opening, which is kind of cool, which is what Art Crawl is too, and I think that's a good thing.
On Supercrawls, they have to shut down the whole street from Main Street all the way past Barton, and they literally, vendors are everywhere. They've got several music stages that are on a rotating kind of schedule. So Art Crawls are, sort of regular pedestrian traffic, a few vendors, but yeah, Supercrawl is much larger in scale that way.
Yeah, I forgot the nuts and bolts part, actually. Sorry about that.
And a few marquee names like Broken Social Scene and Cana and Help.
That's right, last year.
Mixed in with the Hamilton Philharmonic Orchestra.
Mm-hmm. And the Children's Choir.
Yeah.
And, just to speak to the, the power of, what that represents. I mean, we couldn't afford a band like Broken Social Scene to come and play Supercrawl at all. But, having known those guys for years and being in different bands over the years, they kind of saw the value in what we were doing and thought, hey, we would like to come being part of it to help you, make this festival a bit, internationally well known or whatever it is. And we've had a lot of favors cut by people like that to say, we appreciate what you're doing, and even though we don't even live here, we think it's really cool, and we'll cut you a deal to make it affordable for you to do it, which is, I think that more than a lot of other things speaks to the power of what's going on that street. And it's not just because of the annual event, it's because of what's happening in the whole area, monthly, daily, weekly, everything.
Well, if we roll back further, I mean, maybe people would want to know a little bit more about, James Street North itself, a bit of its history, its revitalization, and maybe its ties to the kind of economic and labor history of Hamilton. I mean, what had happened on James Street? Why was it kind of ripe for this kind of regeneration? I mean, how did it get to the stage it's at, and what's gone on?
Well, sorry to monopolize, but our building where Sonic Onion is located is just off of James Street North. We moved there in 1997, and it was a blast zone for a mile around us. There was no one to talk to. There was no one to go have coffee with. There was nothing going on. The only reason we were really there is because it was downtown, and it was incredibly cheap to buy 14,000 square feet of building. And we just hung out there and stuck in there. And the funny thing is that now people know we're there, but the first 10 years, I don't think anyone knew we were really there. And we had 22 people working for us, and we were working on, bands from outside of the country, pushing bands into other countries. And we did a lot of great things in there, and it was we were so under Hamilton's radar. It was kind of nice in some ways. But since then, I mean, we were one of the first people, I guess, to kind of capture the fact that the property is cheap and we can do something in this city that we couldn't afford to do in another city. And then after that, other people sort of started doing the same thing. People like Kieran Dixon and Gary Buttram started buying buildings and converting them into living spaces and galleries, and it just sort of escalated until one day you walk down the street and you go for coffee and it takes you 2 hours to get there and back. because you keep running into people that are doing things similar to you and in the community that are, everyone's talking to everybody about everything they're doing, and it's really cool. So that's a bit of the history. That's a really shortened version of it, but.
And my position as working with social service agencies is kind of interesting because we're positioned in this blossoming arts district, but we're also like a walking distance away from 3 different social service ministries. So everything is so close by, and that indicates kind of the history that's been there, right? Typically low income, a lot of poverty along James Street North, and in a large part, those people are still there. I would say prices are on the rise, of course. So, there's, of course, the gentrification, revitalization debate. I'm sure we'll get into that. But for my work, it's just really, really interesting to be tying those two scenes, those communities, tying those two communities together, right? The low-income community with the arts community. So that's right now. That's where we're at right now.
Along with very active and lively ethnic communities, it was in the 50s. It was a largely Italian neighborhood. It is then developed into a Portuguese neighborhood. When you go down there tonight, you'll notice that a lot of that remains and is vital to the community on James North, and that's one of the great aspects of it. Nobody's driving anybody out. It's just everybody's enhancing each other. So you're going to get great Portuguese fish meals down there. You'll get great pizza. You get everything.
Acclamation, Wild Orchid, Always Bakery, Mulberry Cafe, different.
Yeah. So it's and we've got the armories down there. The Anglican Cathedral is there. It's just a mishmash of wondrous buildings, and luckily most of the owners were too poor to tear them down, so they're still there. And I think, unlike what happened in Toronto and the gentrification of Vancouver, the artists, the rents and real estate prices were so low that the artists themselves could purchase the buildings. The artists aren't renting as they did on Queen Street West. They own, and that's a very important difference. What's happening in Hamilton as compared to other larger cities.
I'm wondering with Casey and Samantha. I mean, you both have quite a bit of global experience and working in music industries and traveling and considering your kind of relationship. I mean, how does Hamilton fit into the bigger picture that you've encountered, and what's been the attraction that's sort of drawn you into working and staying in Hamilton to some degree with your work?
It's funny because you bring up Toronto, and we have Parkdale and Queen Street West that are the two sort of big names of gentrification in our city. And with that gentrification process, we had lower income families, people with mental health issues, mostly racialized bodies, all get pushed out of those neighborhoods to make way for condos. Condos that took up names like the Art Shop or something, taking on these sort of creative namesakes to sort of preserve this history of art that was occurring in those neighborhoods. And it's interesting that you say that artists are buying up these buildings with rent prices going up. I just wonder how landlords, regardless of whether or not they're artists, how they still play into the eviction of people who can afford low rent. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense.
No, you should direct that to Mark. He is a landlord there.
Well, yeah, you're totally right. I can say that we own 3 buildings downtown. Actually, Tim owns another one with some other people. In each case, the buildings that we bought, they were vacant. No one was in them. No, not a single solitary business or person living in them, except for one apartment, and he still lives there, and he seems quite happy. Most people that I know that have purchased places down there have purchased them with a kind of specific use in mind, and it's usually arts-based business of some kind. But I will say that in the past, it's been pretty under the radar. You could get buildings relatively cheap, but low enough that you could turn it into something that made sense. Like you can put like something like White Elephant there in one of our buildings, a great vintage store, and there's a great apartment up above, which is good. And but previous to that, there was an apartment up there. The woman died, and she left the building for sale. So I haven't personally evicted anybody, and I don't want to. But the problem we do have now is that there are definitely some eyeballs on downtown Hamilton, and I can tell you firsthand that today we put a bid on a building hoping that we can get it before some people from Toronto are getting it, because we didn't know that the use they'll have for it is different from what our use will be, and we don't want to see that happen. So essentially, I'm hoping our meager bid will have some weight and save the building and turn it into. We've got an idea for it, and it'll be really cool, and it won't be a condo, and it won't be a high rise, and it won't be a corporate shop of any kind. So it's difficult to do that. But you were right. I mean, there's definitely. I've seen what's happening. As soon as Rotate this move from one place on Queen Street to the next place further down, I was like, what's going on in there? And we have the same problem here for sure, but it's got to be handled delicately, and you've got to find space for people to live. We can't get rid of housing so we can put in more expensive housing.
Now that the train station's opening up,
and that's
Pan Am Games,
a whole other bundle of wax.
Once that opens up, more people will be wanting to buy up property in that area, and that, as much as we don't want that to happen, that's a fear, like that's going to happen.
What seems that
centralize the train station for the non-Hamiltonians?
Oh, sorry. Do you want?
No.
Pan Am Games, City of Hamilton decided to shoot itself in the foot several times trying to land the Pan Am Games, and we gave $150 million to private business owner Bob Young to rotate the stadium 90 degrees. He tore down a landmark and basically built the same stadium, and we gave him a ton of money. Yeah, it's facing another direction, but it's still essentially the same stadium. So we have to ship people in and out from Toronto and the various areas to come see the games. So the old train station, which is a favorite of our mayor, Bob Rutinas, they've rebuilt it, or they're going to rebuild it. And as soon as that happens, it's just coincidental that now people are putting bids in on property in James Street North.
Transportation between downtown Hamilton and downtown Toronto has long been a major problem in revitalizing downtown Hamilton, I think, because we have a bottleneck, a physical bottleneck in rail service that happens in Burlington, a narrowing of the tracks. And they've been limited how many tracks they can put in there. Because of that, we haven't had station-to-station direct GO Transit, which is the commuter rail service between Hamilton and Toronto. It stops at Burlington, basically. And now finally, after many years of lobbying, we're getting it right to downtown Toronto. It'll be running basically at least every hour right through the day more often, which makes it viable for 20-something young creative people in Toronto who can't afford to purchase in Toronto. Let's face it, Toronto it's impossible to buy there, especially in the downtown. So young creative people can now live in the core of Hamilton, and when this is completed, and will be able to get to whether it's work or whether it's work-associated things into Toronto. That is kind of should have a huge effect on the core. Good or bad, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be good. It will certainly open up lofts area, studios area. People will be living here, and the station terminus in Hamilton will be right at the foot of James North, right in this area we're talking about.
Excuse me, is that the old CNR station?
Yeah, which is now the Leuna Conference Center.
People don't know is because there's the old CNR.
It's a beautiful old 30s building.
And then there's also...
They're putting it right next to it.
Which is the GO terminus right now, which is further up. And so they're going to leave. Okay, we do that.
Samantha, to roll back to the other question I'd asked, as someone who's kind of come into Hamilton and is now kind of established and worked in kind of trying to establish a hip hop scene in Hamilton, I mean, what have you found in that scene? What about Hamilton's youth? Because, I mean, much of what we're talking about, I mean, art galleries and bars are great, and certainly something like Supercrawl, which is free and open, but I mean, what is this engagement with Hamilton youth? Do they feel part of this scene as well? Do they feel connected? Because they're probably less likely interested in commuter rail at this point in their lives. So, I mean, where do they fit into this picture?
It's really interesting what's happening with the revitalization of Hamilton. Hamilton has a really low socioeconomic bracket that a lot of the youth fall into. I think it's something like 55% live at or below poverty in Hamilton, a lot of which are single-family dwellings. And when I first came to Hamilton, one of the things that people would say about the hip-hop scene here was that, you know, it's crap. They speak garbage. They have there's no depth to it. You know, it's just really like just a bunch of like trailer white boys trying to be hip hop artists, which is typically like reviewed as a black culture, with like identity issues. And I started looking at what would cause this, and it was the lack of cultivation of the art of hip hop in the community, the lack of guidance from elders in the community, a lot of parents that are not involved in their children's lives. And that's when I started Roots to Leaf to kind of, you know, my thought was, well, we can complain about it all we want, but what are we doing to better it? What are we doing to help it grow in the direction that we want to see it move towards? So hip hop started with as a voice for the people out of the Bronx, New York, and it was oppressed people who had no voice, and this was the way that they just took the tools that they had in their household to express themselves and give a voice to what they were dealing with in their communities. There was a relatability to that around the world, and that's why hip hop blew up. Now it's commercialized. In the early 90s, the record labels kind of like jumped on the culture of hip hop and exploited it, and now it's something that most of us who are involved in the hip hop community don't like, the identity that it's kind of now found. But now with the gentrification of the city, I ran programming at the Urban Arts Initiative where Amber works, and we have battles constantly with now some new business owners and investors in the community who don't like the fact that we have these at-risk street-involved youth coming to this neighborhood, and they feel like that it reflects poorly on their business and deters customers from coming there. These kids were here before any of this started. These are the future of our community, and these are the artists and the future artists of the community, and this is the new, I could strongly say this is the new industry that will take Hamilton forward, I believe, and if we don't invest in them, and if we continue to push them out and not put our arms around them as the arts community and elders in the community, just as human beings, the future of we could very well go in the direction of Toronto, or it could just fizzle out because everybody will get frustrated because we started in love and unity to build what we have now. And those of us who have been working hard and you guys have been doing it way longer than I have, who have worked hard to develop the scene into what it is today, a lot of us will get deterred and might go in different directions if we get muscled out, and if the money trumps our love for the community and what's powerful in this community.
That maybe sets up a kind of good question. I don't want to be pessimistic about gentrification, because I mean there always seems to be a balancing act, doesn't there, where, I mean, this kind of initiatives that are going on now are creating work, and our Music and Labor Conference, for artists, for musicians who are often tenuous forms of labor. So it's terrific to see, you know, work being made available and opportunities, and you know, creative individuals like to be creative, so you know they want to be engaged in this. at the same time, once you start doing this, you do tend to get this gentrification. And this is very easily exploited labor under the kind of Richard Florida models that exist, where it's really for aspirational consumers to come in and consume this art and music, but not the people who live there. And I'm wondering, how do we strike this balance? Because, as soon as you start doing this and artists want to do this, somebody comes in and says, this is great, let's start setting up restaurants and let's get a Starbucks in here, and all of a sudden, it's gentrified. And as people have alluded to, it's what went on in Toronto. It kind of kept pushing west until we got to Hamilton. So are there strategies, are there lessons to be learned that people have that you'd want to see to kind of maintain an actual Hamilton feel to what is going on?
I get worried when we hear talk of strategies and bureaucracies to try and control things like this. The success of the James Street North is the fact that it's happened by itself. And you can't just say, no, we don't want you people in. If it's going to come in, it's going to come in. This is a big city, though. We are a city of 500,000, and there are plenty, if James Street becomes too successful, there are plenty of other places to go. I mean, we saw this, the place used to be Locke, and then all of a sudden Locke became, as we call it, gentrified now, and it's filled with high-end stores and restaurants and boutiques. I don't know how they exist, but they are. And then James became developing. We also, in the east end of the city, have Ottawa North. There are other places that will develop. We're also seeing a great entertainment scene, community block happening on King William. It's not, if Starbucks comes to James Street North, and I'm sure it will, because we can't just say, no, you can't come. There are other places to go as well, and I'm sure that will happen. As prices rise on James North, people who can't afford them will find other places to go. And there's lots in Hamilton, lots of places.
Lots of places we can find.
I'm not sure how it sounds to say that people will find other places to go when they're located and live in those communities. I think that that's problematic, and I think that there can be strategies made to prioritize communities that have been there first, and there can be strategies made to prioritize community arts-based programming like what you folks do, and I think that those are important because gentrification is an inevitable process that's happening in Hamilton right now, but there are people that we need to take care of, and there are people that need support, and to displace them to other neighborhoods because there are other neighborhoods is not the answer. I think it is about coalition building, and I think, Mark, when you talk about trying to create spaces in your development of neighborhoods that include these programming, I think that's an important strategy, and I think that's something that I hope people always consider in their ideas of gentrification.
Well, it's going to be pretty hard to knock the Goodwill services or all the services that are on James North out of there to begin with, and that may be a controlling aspect of James North in itself. I mean, we have men's shelters there, and I don't think they're going to be bought out anytime soon.
We have. Of course, the name's
Good
slipped my
Shepherd.
mind. We have Good Shepherd, and right next door to our building, we have Living Rock. Who are great neighbors, and there are people who come downtown and Living Rock, that's trouble. These kids are trouble. It's like, well, these kids are in trouble. They're not necessarily trouble. We've had some of them come work with us over the years, and they've been fantastic neighbors. And they're not trouble. People's perceptions are a little skewed, particularly when they come from sometimes a 2-car garage and living in the safe area. I think the problem is that I don't think that James Street North has been gentrified yet. Personally, I think we're at a tipping point because I think we're at the point where we did have a lot of local people buying properties, reconfiguring them, converting them into great uses for, whether it's for the arts or for local business or whatever. And it feels like now that there's more eyeballs on us in this area, it's like, well, now there's more than an opportunity for someone to take something that is, not being used at all, turning it into something that can, make for a living, whatever, even if it's a meager one for them, but something they get pleasure out of, that they can do it in a cost-effective way, that is slowly going away. And now you have people looking at properties that come up for sale thinking, well, I'm someone who, tries to target getting Starbucks into a place, for example. They might look at James North and say, well, if I buy this property now and hold on to it, eventually I can get, X, Y, or Z in here that's going to make me this much money. And I think that's the problem we have now, is that there's too many eyeballs on us, and we're kind of our worst enemy. We talk about it, what's going on here, and we're proud of what we do, and at the same time, that gets more interest in the area, and people see development, and they think, okay, well, it's not just cheap artist lofts anymore. It's actually like, I can convert this and make it, real. Put an H&M down here or something. I think we're a long way from that, thankfully. But at the same time, I think we have to watch what's going on, and I don't know what to do to combat it, except we try and buy buildings to combat it a little bit. But at the same time, if you get into a building and you try to convert it with a noble purpose in mind, you sometimes run into trouble, and you're like, I've got to get a tenant in here to cover the fact that I've done this. We haven't run into that yet, but that could clearly happen to people. They can clearly run into a situation where they're behind the eight ball, and they don't want to lose their house or whatever it is they put saved for 20 years, just to maybe politically correctly put in the right tenant. Luckily, we've got away with it so far. We've been really lucky and tried to do things the right way. But I don't think that we're typical of the kind of people who invest in property. We're atypical, and the typical property investor is coming here now and saying, I want this space, I want to hold on to it. There's lots of people who've owned properties, like absentee landlords in this area that have done nothing with them for years, and there's still lots of property that's affordable to people with a lot of money from out of town that just want to hang on to it for purposes that we all really don't like.
Okay, there's a lot of people in the room here who are involved in a lot of various local scenes, so I know there's lots of questions, so I'll open it up to the floor to start asking. I think I saw a hand here in the front.
Yeah, it's just, alongside my academic work in music, I have a history of working in cities, and a lot of my teaching is in cultural policy. And so I'm thinking that the story you're telling it's a fantastic story. It sounds terrific. The history of this. But your notion of a tipping point, it really does seem like that. It's, I worked in Glasgow in the build-up to this European City of Culture in 1990, and then I moved to Birmingham, which was also going through something similar. I'm in Toronto. I've just published a book chapter on performing arts venues in Toronto, and the way in which the super build is like basically flagship venues, and like the smaller scale, nothing has happened. So, but rather than, and I'm with Scott, rather than being pessimistic, rather than seeing it as a problem, sounds like there's a terrific opportunity here to actually somehow try to elude what seems to be almost the inevitability of these processes of gentrification. Because when you look at it, and I have done, and there's a literature out there in cultural policy studies, which shows the inevitability of urban regeneration strategies, where all of these great projects you're talking about do slowly get nudged. You can go right back to Soho in New York. That sort of process there. But I think the question would then be, but how do you do that? How do you grasp this opportunity and actually try and ensure that something different happens from what seems to be the almost inevitable lessons of these processes in other places?
I get a little bit nervous about that whole aspect. There's a discussion right now of the city getting involved. We have one councillor who wants to have build a music office, and I know Tim's involved in that, your partner, and then an office of music at City Hall. What is it? Are we creating a grand poobah of music? And I just like to see, it's great if the city politicians, the city bureaucracy gets involved, but not overly involved. I'd like to see them get involved in the individual needs of the venues and the artists. We're in a city also, we've seen a great expansion in the last 10 years. When I started out writing about the community, there was only one live music venue in this city. That was the Underground. And now we have probably a dozen within striking distance of the core. The city is actively trying to trying to kill two of those just through zoning, demanding more parking spaces in places where people don't drive cars. That would be the Pearl Company, which is one of the top roots performance places in the city, in a place that was previously a street of crack houses and a prostitution stroll. And the city, over a number of years, has prevented them getting zoning approval so that they can have a liquor license in there, because they don't have enough parking spots. And now they're doing it to the Staircase Theater, believe it or not. A venue that has a theater that takes 65 seated people, and they want them to have 10 more parking spots. Nobody drives there. And so when I get really worried, when I start hearing politicians say, we want to take control of this, or we want to appoint somebody to take control of this, when they're not even doing the proper thing on an individual basis.
But that's often how these processes work. I mean, like Toronto has got like several new large concert venues. It's got like a 2,500 seat new opera house. Nobody asked me if I wanted that, and certainly nobody asked any of the small scale improvised music, contemporary jazz, which is kind of my scene, whether they wanted it. And so we've got a 2,500 seat theater, which has no other space in it. No small space, no black box space, nothing. And this is the kind of the trend that we're seeing. And in the same time that super build has happened, a friend of mine has opened a small venue, run it for 3 years, seen it close, it's moved somewhere else with another group of people, it ran for another 3 years, now it's currently on hiatus. And nobody's supporting this, nobody's giving money to this. And so I think it really is like, trying to avoid pessimism, but actually trying to think through how on earth, how do you do that? How do you not let these processes?
A lot of it is just smoothing out zoning issues for them, making sure that there's water pressure on it to say in Hollywood. If they started taking a look and going to the people who run the venues and say, what can we do for you today? It's as simple as that. And they say, oh yeah, yet the water pressure still stinks at this in Hollywood.
Yeah,
they're still attacking zoning at
it's really
Staircase.
It's really not the politicians though. It's what they set up in policy and procedure. That is the biggest. It is the red tape. There's so many different ways to make money off of Hamiltonians. If you want to set up a booth, even some, I won't say the councillor, but some of them were walking around Art Crawl last year, trying to find out who was in charge, so they could just deal with one person, because you know where it's going. They're going to want to charge people for selling something on the street, their artwork. So it is, I mean, it's just money. It's money and power. It's all about money, and that's what, the sad part is that's what holds back creativity every time. And if the city of Hamilton, I don't even know about any other cities. I haven't traveled that much, but if there has to be a template where you can get rid of certain procedures and look at case to case and go, these people need this, let's do this for them. Let's fix this over here so they can do what they want to do over there. And not just umbrella everything, because it doesn't work. And you see it in your own lives and wherever you live.
So I'm actually really glad that we started talking about like the gentrification of the downtown area, because that's something I really wanted to make sure was talked about, because as someone that's pretty involved in the arts community in Hamilton on James North, I love to see the direction that's heading. However, at the same time, we're making comments saying that, well, there's still these immigrant stores and shops that are still around, so we're not necessarily really pushing them out right now. But I don't know, you can walk down James North and you see a lot of signs that are for sale and just like windows that are just kind of like boxed up in a way. And with this revitalization, we're trying to basically hide the evil of Hamilton, which is our sex workers and all of the drugs and the homelessness, and try and push them off to the side. And so with this emergence of this new creative class that we're creating, sure, we're helping out this one body of individuals in the city and trying to bring more people to this city, but how can we help those that were there prior and bring them back? Like, I love what you guys were talking about with the different youth groups and the art initiatives with that. And is there anything else that we can do to try and ensure that we're not pushing everyone out? Because we are, and it's really sad to see.
In the last 2 years, there's been the development of the new CBC Hamilton office and the Annex Gallery, which is a sort of an extension of the AGH. There are, kind of a few other sparse, high-end design stores already on James Street North. And the youth that I work with, they implicitly know that they don't belong there, right? I mean, even I don't think I belong there, but yeah, there's already those places that are exclusive. Even the Mulberry Cafe, they don't go there because they're not going to pay $2.25 for a coffee. So those places already exist. They already know they don't belong there. How can we fix that? Well, I like to think that's what we're working on at my work, right, at Urban Arts. So if we're working with the youth and really including them in those conversations and having this conversation with them as well, that's where we're going. That's where the solutions come from. And I would say that most of my conversations with other artists, with other businesses, with other stakeholders and the powerful people on James North, I would say most of them are really sympathetic and really interested in aiding them however they can. So at this point, people are sympathetic. At this point, if people know about it, they do what they can to have rent affordable or to make sure that they rent to tenants that are going to be inclusive to, gender neutral groups, whatever. So on my end, I'm pretty idealistic, I would say, about how it is right now, that generally people are receptive and interested in being inclusive and being receptive to that.
And I think we might, if we work on changing a lot of the policies and procedures that block us from moving forward or hold us back, such as like Art Crawl, we get a lot of the local venue owners get fined left, right, and center, hefty fines that a small business owner really would struggle to overcome because of capacity issues. They're over capacity because the zoning for the building that they're in is maybe when it was originally structured was a laundromat and only is zoned for 19 people. Now it's a bar and a gallery, and it can easily hold and safely house at least 100 people, but they're getting fined a few $1,000s for a free event that they're doing for the community to cultivate the culture in Hamilton, and they're getting fined a few $1,000s. It's not fair. Like, how are they supposed to overcome that? How are they supposed to do this every month when the city is fighting them because they're not getting their paid dues? I think that they feel they're owed. So changing the policies and procedures so that we can continue to grow in the fashion that we've ventured to do, and also investing in the next generation and still like making sure that we're paying attention to the original community members in the area and the youth there, so that the coming years we still have that population to build what we're already starting here.
Okay, and I know Matt was waiting to get in, and then I'll go with the queue.
So I moved to San Francisco in 1984, lived there till 1999. And one thing that prevented the trauma suffered by low-income, long-term residents, as well as the art and music people, was rent control. And, there was a lot of, it required a lot of effort on the part of landlords to actually reclaim buildings whose values were rising. And that, I mean, even though that rent control didn't provide some ultimate, backstop for everybody, it slowed things in such a way that made it less traumatic, and I think probably ended up preserving some more than what would have survived that economic trauma. So I'm just wondering, what's the status of rent control, and is anybody trying to achieve that? Because it seems like it's agnostic about who's actually there.
San Francisco and it was like New York, his grandfather rent control. Yeah, the problem. There was rent control in Toronto when I was living there in the 70s. It became a political death knell. I don't think any municipal politician, or maybe one or two from the downtown wards, could get voted into office advocating rent control. Just an honest assessment. I don't think that could happen in any major city in North America right now. Those are policies of the past, and good or bad. I don't think it's politically feasible to to enter the picture right now.
Are you talking specifically for commercial or residential?
Residential.
Yeah, I mean, residential is controlled. I mean, the Ontario government sets a percentage you can increase every year, but commercial, it's a free-for-all currently, based on leases anyway.
Hi, thank you so much for being there. 2 questions. One is more, the comparison to Montreal is kind of striking in the sense that one of the things that you're describing, which is this revitalization process, in Montreal, most artists have been strongly opposed to revitalization because it turned out to take the form of a more or less major takeover of whatever. So I'm curious to see how would you account for the fact that artists seems to be on the contrary, into this movement of revitalization. So that's one question. The other one is more general and probably more of a comment and a sort of coming from my heart, which is more like, I'm wondering to what extent, in the context of our very neoliberal world, how can we balance individual entrepreneurship with community-based things? And if all these solutions we're looking for will depend on the goodwill of individuals, then I think whether it's Hamilton or somewhere else, we'll end up in deep trouble. So just your comments on that. Thank you.
Well, on the first point, I think it comes back to what I said earlier. I think we're kind of, if we're not at it, we're kind of approaching a tipping point where I think that, an area being a certain way for a certain period of time lends itself to artists finding their way to be creative, find creative space at a good price that makes sense. And I think the problem is that, as people congregate to that area, it brings a certain amount of attention to it. So I think we're at that point where we're bringing attention to ourselves. And once you've got those eyes on you, then you sort of hit that and pass that tipping point, and you become your own worst enemy because you've just, you're almost displacing yourself and everyone else who's an original inhabitant of the area, unfortunately. I'm not saying that's specifically happening yet, but I feel like we're definitely broaching that point.
My opinion is, how do you balance the both parts, being liberal and entrepreneurship? I think you have to become better people. There's really how you're raised. Really, is like, can you not just be a better person? Cannot a political party actually represent people who are good people? I know that NDP, they were socialists. That was the party you voted for, and now they took the socialism out, and now they're just like liberals to me. To me, it's like there has to be a change in people's attitudes on how we treat one another. That's the only way that you're going to achieve that. And I know it's a hippie kind of thing to say with a guy with no hair, but it's just ridiculous how we treat people. Earlier on, we're talking about marginalization, and we're talking about downtown core, what we were in the 90s here. The media here was just atrocious for what we reported on. If someone got stabbed in downtown Hamilton, it made everywhere, like CH television. It was like all over the radio, print, everything. And it's just how we portray ourselves, really. That there has to be a more positive thing about people. And so if you want to change policies, you have to get like-minded people. I got really frustrated with a friend of mine, Lee Reed, great hip-hop artist, and I interviewed him a couple times, and he would always get me angry because he was just because he was right all the time, and I always wanted to just beat him on something. And you just can't win a debate with this guy. And he said to me, I don't vote anymore. I go, how can you not vote? And this is the stickler. How can you not vote? He says, who am I going to vote for? They're all the same now. No one's like looking after one another. No one's caring for anybody. So that it's kind of like, me, personally, if Justin Trudeau said he would change everything, I would vote for him right away. And I'm not even a liberal. Guy's got a great set of hair anyway. It doesn't matter. But do you know what I'm saying? You have to have that ideology that you're going to be better, and you have to have like-minded people with you to make things better.
It's interesting you bring up Montreal, because Montreal is a really good comparison to what's going on in Hamilton. Montreal and its music scene, I think, is the biggest music scene to come out of Canada. One of the most money-making scene to come out of Canada. And it's interesting how the rents in Montreal are still the lowest, I think. Is that what the case is? Yeah, so kind of, but still low comparatively to perhaps Toronto, for sure. I don't know where now I've lost my train of thought. Where did it go?
Montreal.
Oh, Montreal. Okay. Oh yeah, I went to another province for a second. So I've totally lost it. Sorry, I got so excited talking about Montreal, but I'll come back to it. But I think we were talking about how we can balance development and community initiatives. I think that's what you were asking. I think that there has to be a way that we can prioritize those community arts-based programming and see the value in that, and that people who have power need to advocate and continuously advocate for those programs and the existence of those programs so that they don't get pushed out. And it is people like people sitting on this panel that do that advocating for those that perhaps don't have the ability or have access to speaking out, I think.
Okay, we'll turn to the next question.
Hi. So I've got a question. I'm hearing about half the panel use the word Hamilton Arts Community, and then I'm hearing half the panel sort of referring to it as a scene. And so I heard from part of the table that it's an open, wide space, and Casey asked the question, how wide open? And so I'm relating that to the fact that Sam still felt when the Hamilton arts scene was pretty well established 2 years ago, the need to reach out to a group that hasn't been included. So I guess I'm sort of wondering about the use of the word community and scene, and community as a way of sort of maybe overwriting the fact that Barton Prison is just around the corner from James Street North. And also I just wonder, sort of respectively, what you'd think the future of the Hamilton arts scene or community ought to be in relation to that. No. Sort of like, how do you conceptualize the future based on the use of the word community or scene?
I think we're getting really too caught up in terminology, frankly. It's a community, it's a scene, it's all those things. You can overclassify things, and why do it? Enjoy what's happening, try to encourage it, try to nurture it, tell the politicians to get off their asses or to stop trying to block it. And who cares if it's called a community or a scene?
Oh, that's important. It's important to delineate what community means and who is a part of that community and who gets to participate in that community and what decisions are made on behalf of that community. I think it's important to discuss what community is.
Well, community is important. I mean, yes, there will always be people outside of the community because no community is perfect. You can't talk in absolutes. I didn't say it's open wide. I said it's very inclusive. Let's not talk in absolutes.
I think that from my experience moving here, I found it very much so a community, more so than a scene. I met Lee Reed as Lee Reed, and I didn't know who he was when I first met him. He was one of the first people that I met when I moved to Hamilton. Nilla also I met these people in the streets of Hamilton as human beings first and community members of Hamilton. And I fell in love with those people. And then I learned about them and what was happening here with the thriving arts and music culture that we have here. And I think it's very much a community because everything that I've accomplished here in the short time that I've been here, I could not have done without the support of the people in the community. I think that it's a beautiful metaphor and reflection on Hamilton to have the prison right around the corner from James North on Barton. I think that is the kind of environment that has created these extremely talented and creative people in the city and given them that's kind of been the muse for which they've come to be able to create what they do and put forth in the community. And we can't, I mean, everything has its role in this world. All the good, the bad, and the ugly plays its part and fits together to create and one another and support one another, make it what it is. If the Barton Prison wasn't there, if we didn't have the homeless people and the crackheads on the street, you know, Lee Reed's rhymes may not have been as angry as they are and may not have made such a profound impact on the world as it has.
Keeps rents low, too. I mean, really, that which makes the whole area affordable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it does.
It's true. Well, they all play their part.
I'd rather never hear a Lee Reed lyric again if it would get rid of people on crack and people suffering from that. I understand what you're saying, but I don't know. I'd rather not have a jail.
I would rather not have them, but we have to understand that those are the things that are a part of our community that our community members grew up in, that made them who they are today and made them create the art that they do now. And we can't discount that. We want to move away from that and see a better environment for our citizens of Hamilton. Yes, definitely. But I don't think that we can discount that the role that played in creating what we have now.
Casey, you wanted to jump in on the terminology? I didn't know if you got overspoken
I
there.
disagree with Sam that we shouldn't be privileging. You know, I think we should be honoring people despite, you know, whatever things that they are encountering, if that's drug addiction or if that is, you know, queerness even. You know, these are people that are important and are people that need to be taken care of just as much as someone with, you know, money and a you know, family and a car. You know, like everyone deserves care and respect. So just have to be careful at who we privilege and why we're privileging them, and ask ourselves, why are we somehow placed like higher than others, and why do we deserve more care than perhaps someone who's on the street? We don't.
Okay, the next question.
I guess my question is kind of is sort of continuing along this line, but I have a very personal connection with Hamilton because both sides of my family are here. One thing with gentrification for me, the issue of gentrification, is we're talking about age and economic situations and drug addiction and things like that too, but with gentrification, I feel like there's a lack of an emphasis on the ethnic communities, and I think some people, we've mentioned this already, but like, you know, my father's Polish-Italian, big Polish-Italian population here in Hamilton, and my mother's Japanese, and there's actually there was a burgeoning Japanese community here, a huge one, but it's fairly aged now and it's kind of going away. With gentrification and also with the hipster kind of thing, I feel like ethnicity isn't really a part of those things as much. I was just wondering if there are initiatives to working with like Italian community centers or with Japanese community or with like specific ethnic communities as well that are a big part of the history of Hamilton, because when we're doing gentrification, when gentrification is occurring, I feel like ethnic identities are important because they're for our discussions of music and labor, and in this city as well. Those communities are very important. So, are there any initiatives to work with these communities or anything like that?
Well, the communities, if we're still talking about James North, I mean, the ethnic communities are still a very large part of the street. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's the community centers are still there. The sports bars are still there. I'm worried.
Initiatives that are you know, just like working, collaborating, and doing something that is emphasizing ethnicity in the area as well. Like, sure, they're there, but an active engagement with it. It's just a general, just kind of.
There are some that have started, even just over to Supercrawl. I was part of Supercrawl for the last couple of years as well, and trying to open up a dialogue with the people that were living or that owned some of the shops. And, you know, it was like you build a stage, you were taking up parking, it was like, what is this? And we had to keep telling them that it was, you know, that we're just trying to bring people down to the core, that sort of thing. And it wasn't up until last year, we started the Portuguese band.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think this really answers your question. I mean, I don't
I'm just giving an example that
us
there was
programming
engagement.
Portuguese or Italian community members as part of Supergirl, which we try to do. I don't consider that outreach. I just think we're just trying to involve people who live in the area, and we try to do something that they'll appreciate. Coming from where they come from. I don't think that those communities are. I don't think the Italian and Portuguese community in James Street North is in any danger of being pushed out. I mean, they're really strong and vibrant, and it's like, I think you do get some of the Portuguese and Italian community, and this sounds horrible, but cashing out a little bit. I mean, the lighthouse is for sale for $1.5 million. He wants to retire. He wants to leave, and I suppose someone could come along and gentrify the hell out of his grocery shop, and I hope not, because all those stores along that strip are fantastic and offer a great variety of things that people who live there need. But I mean, you can't force people to stay at the same time. Anyways, I'm going off topic from your question, but.
That may come, I think the issues of funding also come into mind, like what programs get funded. I work with the Kapisanan Center in Toronto, which is a Philippine arts center, and recently they lost almost half of their funding from Ontario Trillium. So when you have a community of arts folks that get collapsed into this category called multiculturalism, your chances of being or attaining any sort of funding comparatively to things that are more seductive, like, say a big arts festival or something like that, then it becomes harder to run programming specific for, communities like one that I find really important, the Filipino arts community. So now we're running off of volunteers, and we don't have money to do as much as we used to, and I think that's a systemic problem that points to who gets funded, why they get funded, and how do we change that?
Just briefly, I think it's probably more a comment than a question, but one of the key points here, it seems to me, is that you guys are all doing things. You're making things. You're helping people make things. But one of the key issues that I've seen again and again and again in these case studies of revitalization or regeneration or gentrification, whatever you want to call it, is that it's about consumption. It's not about production. It's about other people consuming. So, and that's that Richard Florida model, isn't it? It's like you have arts festivals with kind of like ethnic dancers so that people will come along and pay their money, and that's great. Well, no, it's not, of course, because what gets sidelined in all of that is exactly the kind of example you've just given us, that an indigenous community actually making things gets its funding cut, and that money goes elsewhere. But that difference between production and consumption is what's key, I think, here. And when gentrification tips over, that tipping point, tips over into being more about consumption than production, that's when the problems arise.
Okay.
I think that Supergirl has been really good about supporting being the largest arts festival that happens in the downtown core. I'm just going to refer to that. But really good at supporting the community organizations and original members of the community in the downtown core. I know for my organization alone, they provided us a stage last year, one of their larger stages, we did an all-day fundraising concert in the genre of hip-hop, and we had free performers from all over Canada come and perform, and we did fundraising for the youth programming that occurred at the Urban Arts Initiative on James Street North. And I think that's a great example of, while propelling things forward, because it's being run by the members of the community we're still able to have that inclusive nature of the community organizations and people, original members of the community.
Okay, we'll take the last question from
Sure.
Charity, and then we'll have a quick talk with the art crawl and wrap up.
Great. Thanks so much for the discussions. Obviously, lots to talk about. One of the things, though, that I haven't really heard a lot about is the actual programming that is happening, especially Amber's programs. What's going on with the young people? I know you kind of mentioned that it's through the lens of mental health, and I'm wondering, who are your at-risk youth? Who are these people that you're talking about specifically? A little bit, I'm also wondering, it was brought up, but there's a real sort of lack of talking about Indigenous peoples who are from this community or these areas, and where are they, and are any of these young people in these programs? The other thing around, are the programs, even the Roots to Leaves, et cetera, how are these programs sustained? Are they sustainable programming? How do we do that? And I really, coming back, everybody keeps asking for strategies or thinking about that. And, and this comes back to Lynn's point a little bit about the individual entrepreneurs that we see really involved here, but yet the comment about coalition building and maybe collaboration with groups and how we understand communities in that sense is something that I'm wondering a little bit about. And because I'm not really hearing it here. I know communities being used in a particular way here, but I'm thinking about it in those kinds of terms. And the communities of the young people that are very much integral and part of this place. And so I'm just wondering if you could speak to those things for us.
Yeah, for sure. And this is great because I'm really excited to take you all over and see all this in action. So you'll literally meet the youth that are participating in one of our programs in a little bit. So very generally, we offer a couple of different things. We have an open studio program that runs twice weekly. We have a writers group that's just started. We've been doing programming with Roots to Leaf, and they offered four evenings of programming, which was just excellent. They did hip hop, dance, they did urban visual arts, you did beat making, and so like computer. The Art of Rhyme. And yeah, the Art of Rhyme, which was essentially like a songwriting, a rap class. What else do we have? We have a video media project going on right now, partnered with Eclipse or Leon Robinson. He's a high-profile artist in the city. So that's sort of, on any given week, those are sort of the variety of activities that are going on. We have partnerships with the Good Shepherd, with Wesley Urban Ministries. We have a partnership with the Living Rock. Those are our main social service partners, and that's generally where the youth come from. So those are all not necessarily shelters, but services for homeless youth. As well as Notre Dame High School. It's an alternative high school program for disengaged youth that haven't really succeeded in traditional high school programs. And that's where I think we would like to turn for this coming year and for the future as well, is really working with school boards, particularly for disengaged or with disengaged youth that are having a hard time completing their schooling. To answer your question about sort of the cultural makeup of all of this, we have a pretty big deficit in that. I would say, in targeting that. There are pretty defined ethnic groups in the city. There's a lot of immigrant groups, different cultures, and that's something that we definitely have to turn to. At this point, it's kind of a one-woman show at Urban Arts, which is me. So, so it's a big list of things. We have a good partnership also with The Well, who I didn't mention, and they work with queer youth in the city, particularly street involved. So, what did I miss there? Remind me. Thank you. Yeah. Wonderful. So what you'll see tonight is the Center 3 is a print. Did I say this already? I don't think so. Center 3 is it was formerly known as the Print Studio, and they do exclusively print media, print art. So they have a youth program that's centered out of our space. We have a partnership with Center 3, and they'll be showing their print material. These youth have been working on all of this media as part of their coursework. So it's a co-op opportunity for high school students again. So it's sort of a marketplace art show. Do you want me to phase right into that?
Sure, you might as well go right through. Yeah.
All right. So you guys are, so I think I'm looking at the map here. There are a couple of spots along the way. The second space is the Urban Arts Initiative. So I'll head over there right after this. And you can find me if you want to, direct further questions at me, or but please feel free to engage with the youth that are hopefully still there, selling and marketing their pieces, because this is like I think the critical part of our program is that we are on James Street North, and those youth have the opportunity to engage with, all the art consumers in the city. Oh yeah, that's as far as I'll go. I'll let you sort of experience each part as you go through.
I'll just say that when we get to This Ain't Hollywood, just after 7:30, we've ordered a number of gourmet pizzas, which include a number of vegan and vegetarian specialties that they are making, as well as a tray of veggies and dips. So there will be ample food for you, and the drinks are relatively cheap at This Ain't Hollywood. And very, very friendly staff, so a great place. I think, is it a real quick comment?
Yeah, I think it'd be great, because this is such a great discussion. It'd be great just to like make like a top 10 list of like strategies to like, so we've touched upon a couple of things, you know, rent control, community advocacy, coalition forming, government funding and how that's considered for the project. I think it's just, this debate's very complicated, and I think we've, I don't know, you know, it's not my area of specialty, but it's something I'm very interested in. I keep hearing it in all these other various cities, but like, I think the strategy point and like actually what you can implement in a concrete way is often overlooked. I think it'd be important just to like unpack, like, here's 10 things we need to do before we leave. Like, I don't know, I just think it'd be useful to like, if we had like a piece of paper and like could write it down or something. I don't know, I just think it'd be like productive to like summarize it and like be like, this is what we gotta do.
So maybe as you're walking, people can chat and come up and get to the bar and kind of, you know, and share their ideas. So, you know, because the artists are probably waiting for us, as will be the bar and the pizza. So I'd like to thank very much all of our panelists for